I hope you're well on this lovely day. The sun is out. It's absolutely fantastic. I hope you're all well. Hope you've had a good weekend. I'm Chrissa. I'm the founder of Sunshine Support. I'm just going to see now if some of you are watching, and I will stop sharing my screen. Ah, that's better, isn't it? There we go. You haven't got two contrasting pictures of me. Um, Good morning. Let's have a look to see who we've got in the comments already today. Bear with me. Who have we got? Hopefully, we've got quite a few of you. Do say hello, by the way. Oh, I can see some of you already have. That's brilliant. That's what we like to see. Some talkers. Let me get my comments all set up so I can see you properly. Good morning, Rachel. Morning, Kat. Morning, Kirsty. Morning, Caroline. Do say hello if you're watching. Morning, Samantha. Morning, Susan. If you want to say where you're from as well. Morning, Emma Tubes. Hi, Lucy. Then, yeah, do say where you're from if you want to. You don't have to. This is a public video, so um, hopefully you can hear me. It's just asked me if I'd like to unmute myself. I hope that you've been able to hear me and not needing to lip read. Good morning. So I'm Chrissa. Like I say, I'm the founder of Sunshine Support. And I am here to open up FII week this week. It's a very emotive week, very re-traumatizing for a lot of us. I know I find it quite traumatizing listening to all the stories, having to relive things. But it's really important for me personally that we do this so that we can improve practice. But if you know anyone who's been accused of fabricating their child's difficulties or maybe exaggerating their child's difficulties, even if it feels very much like parental blame and there's been no label of FII, then please do tag them because I think this will be really, really useful for them. For those who don't know, FII stands for fabricated or induced illness. It's a formal term, but not a diagnosis, which I'll come on to. But sadly, more and more parents are being accused of fabricating or inducing their child's difficulties. It doesn't just have to be an illness. We see it a lot with neurodivergence. And it's in particularly mums who are targeted. And actually, the research shows us that it's particularly mums who are neurodivergent and their daughters are neurodivergent. And so quite typically, and I appreciate that, presentations occur in all genders, but typically female presentation of things like autism can sometimes spark this very strange interest in accusing a parent of fabricating their child's difficulties. And it often comes when mums or, families ask for help. So it's really, really important that we highlight this and we provide the facts and information to help professionals better understand families, because that's what it comes down to, really. But also for parents to understand what the triggers are for an accusation of FII and how to protect their families. So, like I say, do say hello. It's going to be I'm going to keep it as light and breezy as I possibly can for this topic this morning. We are kicking off a week of learning about FII, false accusations. We're going to be talking to professionals in the field from a variety of different fields within this field of work. Educators, social workers, researchers. But we're also going to be talking to people with lived experience as well. And quite often this is our third FII Awareness Week. Quite often we've heard from the mums because it directly happens to them. But quite often behind a mum can be a dad who's desperately trying hard to make sense of it all and support his partner or wife. And so we're going to be hearing from the dads this week. And I don't know whether you've seen it, but last year we commissioned an impact film all about the dad's experience. I find it really hard to watch But if you haven't watched it, please do watch it. It's on our YouTube channel. We have shared it on our Facebook page. Do give it a watch and get the tissues ready because it's really hard hitting. And that was written by a dad who's gone through it, but didn't want to obviously perform it for camera. So we commissioned the actors, we commissioned the film crew in order to highlight what goes on and the experiences that the dads have. Last year, we did the mums uh, experience, and a lot of you found that really, really difficult to watch, but really hard hitting. So you agree that those sorts of films are needed. So I hope I'm not going to say you hope you enjoy it because you're not going to enjoy it, but I hope that it resonates and that it validates you. And I hope that if you're a professional, that it really helps to improve your practice. I'm just going to see who else has commented and say good morning to a few more. Morning, Michelle from Portsmouth. Good morning, Sue. Morning, Lucy. Lucy says, oh, I'm not neurodivergent, but my son is. My son has cyclical sickness, which took a lot to be believed. Good morning from Liverpool. We have a lot of Liverpool families, actually, Diane, from a variety of different local authorities. I've got my lovely Jessica from Sunshine, who's asking me to say good morning to Bella. Morning, Bella. I bet she's going mad now. I hope I'm in the right colour dress for you this morning, Bella. Bella doesn't like it when I wear black. So I decided to come in FII colours because FII week is very predominantly a purpley pink. So I hope I look like I'm going to a party, Bella, and we'll sing happy birthday. Morning, Fiona in West Yorkshire. Morning, Maxine. Morning, Tova in Hertfordshire. Morning, Fiona. Morning, Paula. So we've got lots and lots of people watching this morning, which is great because that's what we want. We want you to feel validated. I'm here to answer your questions as well. So if you've got any questions, fire them away. But I'll talk to you a little bit about FII week. So like I said, welcome everyone to our third annual FII Awareness Week. So FII meaning fabricated or induced illness. Like I said before, if you know someone who has been accused of this, or maybe they're being blamed for their child's difficulties or presentation, or perhaps not believed, because we see that so much, where parents perhaps go into schools and they say, my child's having difficulties, and the school's like, they're fine in school. How many times have we heard they're fine here? They're fine when you go. Um, sorry, I've got a bit of a lurgy going on this morning. I'll just drink from my Nessa cup. That was good news this weekend, wasn't it? Okay, sorry, ADHD moment. Let's get the coffee and protein in me. So a lot of parents are accused of making it up, like I said, or perhaps they're accused of exaggerating their child's difficulty. So we appreciate your child has an autism diagnosis, but we don't see what you see. Now, that is actually quite an innocent comment. We don't see what you see. But when it starts to escalate, and you can see the eye rolls, and you can see that there's a bit of a discussion happening behind your back about, we're not quite believing what mum is saying here, or dad. If you know anyone who's experienced any of these things, tag them now or share this video with them. Like I said, for those who've just joined us, I'm Chrissa. I'm the founder of Sunshine Support, and we are really, really proud as an organisation to be so heavily involved in creating awareness of FII. We founded the Global Awareness Weeks for FII. This is our third one, and it's a real tricky job for us. It's not something that we do lightly. We put a lot of effort into creating this week, but it's also really traumatizing. So the level of self-care that we have to have around this week, before and after, is crazy bonkers. So fabricated or induced illness is a term used by professionals to describe parents who report their child's illness or difficulties in a way that differs to what the professionals have observed. So parents like me, I've been accused of it, and thousands of others around the country and the world, actually, who desperately seek support for their children, they tend to, quite often, it tends to be us who is targeted. It's usually a child with SEND, special educational needs or disabilities, that's targeted. I think there's a great misconception that social workers are the ones that start these accusations. But actually, we conducted some research last year, and nearly 40% of all accusations begin with teachers. And the teachers don't believe what the parents are describing. And it starts with, we don't see that in school. That's weird. And then the parent keeps persisting. My child's really having difficulties. They're having these big meltdowns when they get home, and they're reporting that they're really struggling during the school day, but they can't talk to anyone. And then that leads to, well, they only have to tell me. But if you've got a child who's neurodivergent, selective mutism is a very common presentation within neurodivergence. So a child might not be able, they might not feel safe enough to tell someone that they're struggling. Anyway, this can escalate to parental blame. It fractures relationships between home and school. And quite often it's a trigger for social care to be involved. Um, and sometimes it's quite innocent in the fact that the teacher actually believes that having social care involved will help the family and will start to unpick some of the difficulties that perhaps they can't see in school. But sometimes it can be done in quite a malicious way. So there's lots of reasons for it, and we're not here to bash anyone. But what we have done is we've invited thousands of schools all over the country to join our free webinars this week, and also our very, very low cost training webinars this week. Because FII Awareness Week is for everyone. We can't make a difference as parents. We can't make a difference as just professionals. We need to be working together, and we need to get this very up-to-date training. And everything this week is the most up-to-date training. So you're going to be hearing from people who are currently still researching this stuff. And have completed very, very recently new research. So everything you hear this week is going to be the most recent information and recent training. But I think it's really important that professionals who describe parents as having perplexing presentations, that they understand what that actually means and what the impact on the families is. So, like I said, to sort of recover this, because I don't want to scare anyone who's going to be asking for help. This is still quite a rare thing, but it's on the rise. We are seeing better handling of it, if I'm honest. We've seen quite a few cases where it's been sent to social care by a teacher or school or a designated safeguarding leader at school. And then the social worker has actually quashed it and said, actually, no, there's nothing to see here. This is a neurodivergent family. I've worked with lots of neurodivergent families, or better still, quite often we're working with social workers now who are neurodivergent. So they recognize the way that a neurodivergent family might look really different to a neurotypical person who can't quite get their head around it. We respect other cultures, but we don't tend to respect other presentations in terms of neurodivergence. And remember, neurodivergence, there's so much thrown into that pot of neurodivergence. We think of autism and ADHD, but there's also dyslexia. There is a developmental language disorder. Trauma can also play a major part of that, because actually having a trauma in your life, or a consistent trauma, something that has changed the way that your brain reacts and your nervous system reacts, that can actually make you look a certain way that other people can't understand. So it might make you quite rigid in your approach, or it might make you quite over compliant in your approach. And it can look, a lot of people think that people who have PTSD are autistic or have ADHD, when actually it's PTSD. Anyway, I could talk for hours about trauma. But that journey, it can often, like I said, it starts very, very sort of innocently, with a parent just asking for help for their child who's struggling. And I think one of the things that we really need to pay attention to is when a child masks, or when a parent masks, or when they're both masking, which is obviously a very common thing for us neurodivergents. I'm neurodivergent, so I can speak on behalf of myself here. Um, and, I have neurodivergent children. One of them in particular really does mask uh, in public where she doesn't feel particularly safe or doesn't feel like she can be herself. And so she presented very differently at school to what she did at home where she felt safe. And quite often this leads to teachers not recognizing that presentation, particularly if they don't understand masking. And they sort of disbelieve that this is a thing. And it can sound like it's all made up. And I think the more dismissive a teacher is, the more frustrating it can become for a parent. Um, and the more frustrated you are, the you're not at your best, are you? I know that I wasn't at my best. The more frustrated and anxious I got, the more persistent I got. And the relationship for me definitely broke down and was fractured. And I think then parents seek the information for their child. Well, if nobody else is going to help me, I'm just going to do it myself. I'm going to get the EHCP. I'm going to find out about autism in girls or whatever it may be, or ADHD, whatever it may be. And they go out and the parent upskills themselves. We see thousands of them every week on our webinars. They go out, they upskill themselves, and then they go back to the professionals who are like, wow, you look a little obsessive about this. How do you now know more than me? And it just completely dislocates the relationship between home and school. And I think the more that happens, the more professionals attribute the blame to the parent. And it can get a little sticky and tricky. And I think so many of us, I think that many of us can resonate. I know we get a lot of cases through that follow this same sort of trajectory, and we have to sort of come in and almost intervene and say, okay, everything needs to stop. Let's just work out what's happened to this point and what we're trying to aim to achieve moving forward. But if you've not got that sort of somebody there as your witness, advocate, friend, it can lead to social services involvement. And we've heard many stories of this becoming really worrying. And sometimes these cases lead to child protection hearings. I know I certainly went through that. And we've even heard of some forced adoptions as well, which is really incredibly sad. There was one particular case that got in touch with us where the mum said she was absolutely convinced her child, I can't remember whether it was what the gender of the child was, but her child was autistic. She was quite convinced. And she had all the evidence as far, the anecdotal evidence. But nobody believed her, to the point where this escalated over, some months or maybe years. And eventually her child was removed from her and adopted into another family, where the child then proceeded to get a diagnosis for autism. What do you do in that scenario? Now, this is incredibly rare, but I think it's really important that we highlight these things are happening. We're here to call this stuff out. And so it can seem quite scary. There are absolutely ways to avoid these difficult routes. We don't have to go down those difficult routes. But it is really tricky because as a parent, you're very invested in your child. We know from research that autistic women and their autistic daughters are at the highest risk of being disbelieved. And if you can't comprehend this, by the way, if you're thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I genuinely don't believe what Chris is saying. Or there's no smoke without fire. If you're thinking that, and particularly when it comes to child protection proceedings, then consider yourself very, very blessed and lucky that you've not had to go through it. And I admire that advantage that you have over people like me. Because actually it does happen, sadly. And it happens far too often. Once is far too often. I stand or sit strong. to tell the tale of my own FII journey from several years ago. And this week, I will be sharing snippets of that journey, along with many others, by the way. There's going to be lots of stories shared this week. But the main point is that I want you to know that there is help. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is help. It doesn't matter whether you're just receiving that initial parental blame or whether you've gone full circle and you're in child protection proceedings. There is help, and we're going to be covering so much of it this week. So you're not on your own. My wonderful Sunshine team have worked flat out to get a week of really diverse learning set up for you. And it's an amazing week. As tricky as it is for me to just read some of the content that we're going to be covering, it's an absolute corker of a week. We've got everything covered. And our Sunshine team will be assisting all the FII experts that we've drafted in to make sure that you're heard, to make sure that you're supported, that you're validated, and that you learn more. So I'm going to come to the comments and then I'll tell you what we've got lined up this week, because I could probably, let me have a look. I don't know whether I can share my screen, but I will tell you what we've got lined up this week. And actually we shared the lineup yesterday, I think, but I will share the lineup with you and let you know what we've got on. So let me come to your comments first of all. Lisa says, if everyone knows this is a thing, why does it still happen so much? Why aren't professionals more informed? You're absolutely right, because I think parents know about it, but actually we are not seeing that it's translating so much to teachers. We've had quite a lot of meetings with teachers, and we've sort of said to them, how much do you know about FII? And they've never heard of the term. So it is quite concerning. And all we can do is keep pushing this out. I can assure you that thousands of schools receive our emails. A very small percentage of them engage. And it's usually the schools that probably don't need to engage, the good ones, the ones that are doing it right anyway. And Caroline says, it's often upon you before you know it, it's happening. You're absolutely right, Caroline. Michaela says, I always end up crying and getting emotional in meetings. Advocating is emotional. You're absolutely right. Mel says her son goes to Ascend School, always gets, oh, they all mask here. Oh, well, that's helpful, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Kirsty says, in reports from the head teacher, I've been called needy and they believe I find satisfaction from negative situations. Sometimes I want them to read their words back. When they say things like that, you almost want to go, now just hear yourself. How can I find satisfaction from negative situations? Caroline asks a really good question. When you say rare, do we have actual numbers? Now then, Caroline, we have been working with a number of journalists to do freedom of information requests for years. And sadly, what happens is local authorities don't call it FII. So they might call it FII, but quite often it's disguised amongst a bunch of other stuff. So because of that, we don't know the actual number. However, Andy Bilson, and we actually published his research on our blogs actually last year, I think. Andy Bilson and Professor Luke Clements, they do a lot of research in this area. So by all means, give them a Google, see if you can find some of their research, because what they do is they look at the number of disabled children. And I think they even drill down into the fact that those disabled children perhaps have a neurodivergence. And then they look at the numbers of those children on child protection and how long they're on child protection. Because quite often, a child, I know in my situation, my child was put on child protection. The minimum is usually 3 months because you have to have a review meeting after 3 months. But during that time, a load more assessments are done and spontaneous visits to the home where they actually find there's no need for the child protection. So research has been done into that. So it's not a direct, this is how many, but you can start to see a pattern. I hope that makes sense. Have a look for those people. So Andy Bilson, Bilson, and Professor Luke Clements. And we've had Luke on our Facebook Lives, actually. You could probably look back on the video section of our Facebook page. Have a look there, because you might find that there's an old uh, video, like a Facebook Live, with Professor Luke Clements, where he's talking about this research. So do look both of those people up, because they are phenomenal in this area. We do have problem areas. So Michelle has named a local authority. We do have problem areas. That's not one that's been brought up on our radar. And I won't discuss on here where the problem areas are. But there's one particular area with a social care team who really don't understand neurodivergence, to the point where they've drafted us in. The local authority have paid for us to be able to try and help them through the cases. And it was just really messy, really, really messy. Let me see. Morning, Mira in Derby. Um, there we go. Michelle says, my son is 13. He's neurodivergent. He has dyscalculia and dysgraphia. There we go. You see, so neurodivergence is far reaching. There's a lot in that pot. Joe says, where can we find the video you're talking about? I think perhaps you are referring to the FII impact video. That's on our YouTube page, but we'll share the link. So Jess, who's helping me with this, Jess, could you share the link to both the impact videos on the YouTube page, please? There's the mum's journey and the dad's journey. Okay. I can't see any more questions coming in, but it might be that I've missed them, so I'll keep refreshing them. Okay. So I'm going to tell you what we've got lined up this week. So today you've got me, so by all means make good use of me. Tomorrow we've got at 10 a.m. we have the big webinar. The big webinar we've set to be free to watch on Facebook. So all you need to do is tune in the way you are today. It's an overview of FII. So FII being fabricated or induced illness. Now, this overview is being brought to you. I'm going to host the webinar, but I'm going to be joined by my wonderful friend and colleague, Kathy Long. Kathy is an independent social worker. She's also a mental health practitioner. In fact, she's a almost very highly qualified psychotherapist. And she is by far known, she's the most famous independent social worker in the country, and she has created the guidance that social workers really should be working to when they're presented with a family with FII. And Kathy is very passionate about getting it right for neurodivergent families. So this guidance is written all about neurodivergence and differences, and how differences can present in different ways that perhaps are quite unusual to somebody who's not neurodivergent. So Kathy co-authored the guidance, which was based on research, with the fantastic Dr. Fiona Gullen-Scott, and both of them are going to be with me tomorrow, 10 o'clock on Facebook. And we're going to be introducing FII, giving a really good overview to it, looking at the most recent research, looking at the research as well, and discussing the research that's happening now. But these ladies are really at the forefront of that. So that one is one to absolutely tune into. And like I say, it's free on Facebook, 10 o'clock tomorrow. Then at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be doing my school school avoidance webinar. Because actually we know that when children struggle to attend school, that can sometimes spark or trigger the involvement of social care. If a school isn't well versed in how to deal with school avoidance, then quite often they can say it's a safeguarding reason, we're going to be sending you to social care, and it can escalate from there. So that's 1 o'clock. Now, all of the other, apart from tomorrow's 10 o'clock one with Kathy and Fiona, all of the webinars that we have are going to be hosted on our Sunshine Academy. So if you want to sign up, ask for the link now. We will put the link in the comments and I'll put it in the video as well. But it's really, really important that you sign up so that you can access all of the other webinars. And what's brilliant is that they're not ticketed. You're not having to pay individually for each webinar. You pay one fee for the week and you see everything, plus everything we did last year and everything we've done on this topic, plus everything else that we've ever done at Sunshine. So by all means, do sign up. So yeah, 1 o'clock, I'm going to be talking about school avoidance and its links with FII. We're going to be covering the law as well. So I've got my colleague with me. At 8 o'clock tomorrow, this is one that doesn't get enough coverage because people don't realize it exists. We are going to be talking about Gestalt language processing with Dawn Tomalin from Small Talk. So we've all heard Libby Hill talk about this. This is Libby's colleague, Dawn. And Gestalt language processing is all about the way that a child or a human learns language. So some of us learn in a way that we learn individual words and we string them together after learning the meaning of individual words. But some of our children, which is quite common with neurodivergence, learn bunches of words together. So they might repeat what they hear on TV quite a lot. I remember one of my children would repeat adverts and everybody would laugh. So she carried on repeating adverts, but she didn't actually know what any of the words meant. She would just repeat the words in an advert, or sing, like washing machines live longer with Calgon. That was one that she kept doing all the time. However, this can turn quite sour if what they've heard really piques the interest of the safeguarding team at school. So it could be they've heard something that may be inappropriate, or it may just not be, it's not necessarily naughty as such, but it may not be appropriate for what they're talking about at that time with a professional. So they may be in a lesson learning something and they keep saying something else. But there's echolalia in there. By all means, give these terms a Google. What we're finding is a lot of children who are Gestalt language processors, they end up piquing the interest of the designated safeguarding lead at school because they don't understand what they're talking about and they assume they're being abused. And we're seeing more and more of these children being taken to social care and their parents trying to explain, but that's a caption off the TV. That's from his favorite film, or that's from Power Rangers, or whatever it may be. And the parents end up being accused of FII, or they get put on a child protection plan. This is something we need to talk about more. And Gestalt language processing is something we don't talk about at all enough. So Dawn is going to be here talking about the links between Gestalt language processors, FII, child protection. And so that's a real valid one. That's 8 o'clock tomorrow. So tomorrow we've got 10 a.m. Kathy and Fiona live on Facebook talking about FII in general. Then at 1 o'clock on our Sunshine Academy, you've got me talking about school avoidance. And then at 8 o'clock on our Sunshine Academy, you've got Dawn talking about Gestalt language processing. So then Wednesday, we've got an action-packed week. We've got a dad's discussion at 12 noon on our Sunshine Academy, where we've got a bunch of dads who are going to be talking about their journeys with social care and how they support their wives, but also how it affects their mental health. And this is a big thing because men don't talk about this stuff enough, really. And so that's happening at 12 noon. And then at 7 p.m., we've got the fantastic Elizabeth Archer, also known as Ed, the CEO of the PDA Society, who's going to be talking about PDA and FII. PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance, and currently it's known as a profile of autism. And we are still learning about PDA. It's something that was discovered in the 1980s in Nottingham. However, we are learning all the time about PDA. And we are also understanding that it's a very, very misunderstood profile. There's lots of research going into it. However, in the meantime, we are finding there are still not enough professionals who understand it. We get a lot of professionals come to us and say, I think this child's got PDA, and the child hasn't got PDA. They've got demand avoidance, which is actually quite natural for a child any child to have demand avoidance. And so we get a lot of demand avoidant children piquing the interest of safeguarding people. But if the child has PDA, then quite often professionals just don't know. They don't know enough about it. They don't know how to support a family who are living with PDA. And so this is another really, really good topic to cover. So 12 noon, Dad's discussion on the Academy, 7 p.m., the PDA Society talking about PDA and FII. That's also on the Academy. So let me see what else we've got lined up for Thursday. Thursday, we've got 10 o'clock in the morning on the Academy. We've got the fantastic Rachel Gavin, who's also an independent social worker, works very closely with Kathy Long. She's going to be talking all about how to assess neurodivergent families in terms of social care assessments, because she is fantastic at it and she has a lot of lived experience. But so often social workers are not applying a neurodivergent lens to the work that they're doing. So Rachel's going to be covering that. It's for parents as well. So if you're a parent or carer and you're sort of really interested in the way that social workers are undertaking assessments, then please do come along. But also if you're a social worker, this is great CPD. So that's happening at 10 o'clock on the Sunshine Academy. Then at 1 o'clock, we have got the heartbreaking journey of David Crisp. If any of you have listened to David before, David talks about his own journey of FII, which is so alarming. As you're listening to it, you're thinking this cannot be real, but it absolutely is. David's going to be talking about his journey. David is a very highly regarded trainer in the field of autism. He's a consultant. He's got bundles of qualifications, tons of life experience. So that is one not to be missed, really. Doesn't matter if you're a dad or a mum or a social worker or a teacher. If you're invested in this topic, give David's webinar a watch. So that's 1 o'clock on Thursday. At 8 p.m., we have an amazing webinar by Shadell Cook. Shadell is lovely. If you've watched any of our webinars with us, you will know she has the most gentle, beautiful accent and voice, and she just makes you feel really safe. Shadell's going to be talking about trauma and mental health because we don't consider that enough. In fact, I've said that several times, haven't I? We talk so much about FII and parental blame, but we don't talk about all the things that are really important within that. Trauma and mental health. I was accused of FII 7 years ago, maybe, 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, actually. It's still with me. It's still with me as a huge injustice. It still makes me physically unwell. I have had weekly intensive trauma therapy for 4 years, and I'm working through it and I'm doing really, really well. But it takes a lot of deep digging to get underneath it all to be able to heal yourself. So anything that you can do if you're going through it or to protect yourself beforehand, this is a really worthwhile webinar. So just to cover my bases there again for Thursday, 10 a.m. social care and social care assessments for neurodivergent families with Rachel Gavin. 1 o'clock, we have David Crisp talking about his experience and his journey. And then at 8 o'clock, we've got Shadell Cook talking about trauma and mental health. So that's on Thursday. Also, I should have said on Wednesday, we have a cuppa and chat in the evening that's online. So if you feel that you need to have a chat, we have a dedicated cuppa and chat that you can come to. It's free of charge. And you can just join us online. If you want any other links, by the way, please do pop it in the comments and be specific so we know which links you're after. And then on Friday, we've got a lovely webinar that is really specifically for schools, but for parents as well who are going through this with schools. At 10 a.m. on Friday, we have Kelly Jarvis and Gabby Gregory, both of our Sunshine educators here. So Gabby and Kelly are highly specialist educators. And they're going to be talking about how we improve educational practice. So how do we make that happen? because it's not costly. It's all down to the way that you approach things. And they're wonderful, wonderful humans, these two ladies. There will be absolutely no blame. There will be lots of curiosity. And we're going to be covering that to see how we can improve educational practice. To improve the outcomes really for the children who are tied up in all of this, because I think that's forgotten about quite often, that the children who are at the core of all of this happening. So I'm going to come back to your comments now. Let's have a look. Oh, I can see that Jess, my colleague, has been posting lots of links for you. Tracy said, this will be a really good one to watch. Our son doesn't show emotions in school. So the 1 p.m. video is perfect. So I'm thinking that you meant one of the ones that we were talking about for this week. So that's good. Sue says, I'm at work doing 12-hour shifts doing the majority of these wonderful events. Can they be watched on the Academy? Yes. Great question, Sue. So all of the stuff that we do this week is recorded and it's going to be on our Sunshine Academy. Just to let you know what the Sunshine Academy is, it's an online learning platform that's set up a little bit like Netflix. So you pay a monthly subscription, but you get access to hundreds of webinars, lots of live webinars as well. We do monthly Ask Me Anything events. So we get experts in and you get to sit with them in the room with your camera on and chat to them face to face for an hour, which is just amazing. We also have a community section on there, so you can post your questions and advocates and our team will answer your questions. So it's really lovely. It's a really lovely platform. And it's an absolute steal. It's a bargain at $10.99 a month. You get so much information on there. But all of these webinars are going to be recorded and on there quite quickly. So as soon as the recording is processed, they'll be on. Michelle says, my son is ticking all these boxes for piquing interest. This is why we need to get ahead of it, Michelle. So quite often the professionals will see all these points and they'll be like, yeah, something's going on here. We need to look into this. What is going on? But actually it's nothing. It's neurodivergence and additional presentations attached. So it's really important that we get ahead of them before they start thinking that. I don't know whether I covered your comment before, but I think I did, about getting emotional in meetings. Yes, I did, didn't I? And I think it's something that's really common, you know. I get really emotional in meetings. I find meetings really, really triggering. I find them very difficult. Doesn't matter how innocent the meetings are, I find them really, really hard. And so I completely get that, completely get that. Kirsty says, I know PDA is different to ODD, but would this be helpful? I think so, because actually, even though it is different and PDA is, you know, a profile of autism, whereas ODD isn't, I think it's probably going to be presenting very similar sorts of problems. So I think it would be very useful for you, actually. Yeah. Let me just see what other comments we've got. Let me just change how I'm seeing these comments. Let's get the newest. Caroline says, who is tackling what to do when it happens? We're going to be covering that all week. So whilst a lot of the stuff that we're going to be covering is aiming to prevent new cases, we're also going to be talking about what happens if you're finding yourself in the thick of it. And what to do. Kathy in particular will be talking about that tomorrow, and so will Rachel, the independent social workers. And throughout all of our webinars, we always talk about how this comes to be, how are we in this position, what to do when you're in the position, but also how to look for the signs that you're entering that, if that makes sense. So it's all about prevention, but also we're going to be looking at what happens if you, like I said, find yourself being accused. Susan says, can we pay for just a week or is it a monthly direct debit? It's a monthly subscription, but you can cancel at any time. So you just go on and press cancel. So basically it's just 1 month minimum, essentially. You pay for your first month, and if you wanted to just watch these and then cancel your subscription, then you can. Let's Jane says, my son has echolalia. I used to repeat every day, I love you. And he would copy it. Then one day before Christmas, he said, I love you too, mummy. Oh, isn't that lovely? That's where it works well. That's where it works well. Kirsty says, my son used to like that advert, that Calgon advert. Honestly, it plagued me. And there were other things as well. And because it was quite a while ago, I won't say the adverts because you probably won't remember them, but there were several adverts. And I would giggle along, but actually it was getting on my nerves. But anybody who would meet my child would find them hilarious because, um, you know, reciting adverts is quite funny. But it can land you in a bit of trouble. Obviously not adverts, but there's other stuff as well. Um, Heather says, how often are CAMs the instigators of accusation of FII? Now, CAMs came quite low down, actually, on our research. I can't remember exactly where they were, but they and social care were quite low down. So, like I said, almost 40% were teachers, but it was a much lower amount for CAMs. I think quite often CAMs are caught up in it, but not the instigators, if that makes sense. So you tend to find that they're drafted in to write reports. And we have seen it so many times, and this is unlawful, by the way, where professionals say, we've decided this family have met the threshold for child protection. Can you now write a report to back that up? That's not how it's meant to happen. The reports are meant to come in, and from those reports, they decide. It's not meant that I don't like this family. I've decided they meet the threshold. Therefore, everybody has to back me up with a report. Quite often, CAMs are dragged into that part. I'm not saying that they collude. I'm just saying that they're quite often dragged into that part of the process. The instigators tend to be schools. Medics, I think, were the next one. So I'll have to get the research. I should have brought the numbers really. The most common one was teachers and schools, and the next common was the medical professionals. So children being admitted to hospital. We see a lot of overlap with things like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, where it's really tricky to diagnose because people don't understand it. That's why it's tricky. Not necessarily that it's a tricky thing to diagnose, but so many people, so many medics don't understand EDS, so that they completely miss the opportunities to diagnose, and it can look like child abuse. I should also say as well that FII is not a diagnosis. FII is a series of characteristics. FII is not Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And I think it's really important for us to know that. Caroline says, Luke from the Cerebra report. Yes, that's Professor Luke Clements. So look for his work there with the Cerebra charity. So do that. Do that. You can tell I'm coming to the end of my caffeine surge from my coffee. Tracy says, our son has school phobia. School not seen it, but we've seen him display it in school to staff. They take him to a class where he screamed he doesn't want to go to school. He's verbal, but not understanding how to explain emotions. Huge masker, bless him. I know school have looked down at me. This week is going to be really good for you, actually, particularly the school avoidance webinar, because we're going to be talking about why children avoid school, why they are reluctant to attend, why they may be fearful of school, and why they can't attend. I'm going to be going over that in quite a lot of detail. Caroline says, oh, so we were talking about earlier, how many cases of FII are there in the UK? And I was saying that's really tricky to get. Caroline says, my own case would never have actually registered as a case yet because they don't actually describe it as FII. They describe it as something else. Lisa says, is it because they don't know how to help the child, so blame the parent for failings as a deflection? It can happen like that, Lisa. I wrote a blog, actually. I posted it this week. It's an old blog, but it still stands. That actually when a professional doesn't understand, they fill that lack of knowledge with stuff that perhaps they've been exposed to before, particularly social workers, where social workers are overexposed to abuse, aren't they? We know that. They're overexposed to cases where children are being neglected and abused. However, quite often, if they can't understand how a case has got to this point, sometimes they fill in the blanks with assumptions and they don't realize they're doing it. It's the human brain, it's just how it works. Um, and they can quite often, we do see a lot of parental blame because they can't work it out. It is a lack of knowledge. This is why we have to get into schools. We have to get into social work practices to be able to deliver this education. Um, so it's really, really tricky, really tricky. Um, Emma says, I was told I needed to go to the GP for antidepressants. It was obvious my child was crying out for attention and I needed to provide boundaries. We see this so often as well, where parents are to blame, where, it's your mental health rubbing off onto your child. They're catching it almost. Now, children can almost catch your anxiety because they feed off it. They came from you. They understand you. But that's not the reason that your child is struggling to an extreme. So it's really tricky. So frustrating. And Caroline says some of the safeguarding guidance out there is shocking. Absolutely. If you have a look on our FII website, so if you go to FII-awareness.co.uk, on there, you will see the guidance that Kathy Long wrote for the British Association of Social Workers. So they should be following this guidance. Do have a look at that. Caroline also says, Caroline, you came up with some brilliant points this morning. It's often upon you before you know it's happening. You're absolutely right. That, if you watch the impact videos that we've created, both of them say the same thing. 1 minute I was asking for help for my child, the next minute I'm in a child protection conference. Both parents that we have developed those scripts with have both said the same thing, that it's almost like all of a sudden the train is off the tracks and you have no idea how it got off the tracks and it's going in a direction that you have no idea where you're going. So we have a whole heap lined up for you guys. It's really important that you get signed up ahead of the week if you want to watch any of these so that there's no last minute panics. So today's a really good day. It's good that it's a bank holiday. So go to sunshine-support.org/academy and you can sign up for our academy and get yourself ready. You can also see what we put on there from last year, so you can see how this year differs. And there's loads of other webinars on there that will complement the learning that we've got for this week. So do sign up. We've got a brilliant week ahead. If you need us, reach out. It's going to be a tricky week. It's going to be quite traumatizing. It will be very emotive. We're here for you. Remember to come to our cuppa and chat. Send us a message on Facebook. Get in touch via our website. We're here. You don't have to suffer on your own. Okay. But have a lovely week. I hope that you actually do benefit from what we're teaching you. I hope that you find it useful, even if it's not necessarily enjoyable. And if you need us, just get in touch. Okay, have a lovely rest of your day. See you soon. Bye.